Welcome back to more of our Mackinac Moments from this year's policy conference at the Grand Hotel. Sitting down, I always enjoy talking to Jerry Norsey of DTE Energy. Great to have you here, Jerry. Thanks so much for the time. I think that the future of energy right now it feels as wide open and as exciting and full of potential as I won't say ever, because once upon a time we couldn't imagine running things the way that we do with electricity.
Sure.
But this must feel like a frontier to you right now.
So thank you, Devin, for having me here. And
Sure.
I would say it is one of the most exciting times in my career. I've been
Yeah.
in this business 35 years, and I've never seen so much opportunity in front of us. And the opportunity really is twofold. One, to really transform the way we produce power. You know, primarily over the last 40, 50 years, we've produced power with coal, and we're making a fundamental shift towards renewables and also natural gas, and of course continuing with our nuclear operations. So that's really exciting in itself.
We'll talk a lot about nuclear here.
Right. And if that wasn't exciting enough, fundamentally transforming our grid as well, which most of it was built in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So it's in great need of modernization and automation to prepare us for worsening weather patterns, and also the demand that's coming from EVs, which I have to tell you, that's really exciting.
Well, as somebody who drives one, yes, I'm glad that's there. But the challenge is, think about how many things that you now plug in every day in your house, whether it's a phone, a computer, an iPad, your toothbrush.
Yes.
I mean, it's just a million things right now, and that demand is extraordinary, and it must be crazy to think about, if you keep going exponentially where we are, what the demand will be in 10 years from now.
Well, we're certainly anticipating significant demand growth from EVs, and that'll start to play out in the mid-2020s. We're starting to see it already. A couple of years ago, we were connecting maybe 250 EVs a month. This year, we're connecting over 1,000 EVs a month. So it's starting to ramp, but it'll take time. And so about 3 or 4 years ago, we really started ramping up our investments in the grid to really deal with two things. One is the worsening weather that we've seen, and we're seeing it get that more and more violent as each year passes, but also preparing for demand. So, we're investing well over $1 billion this year, about $1.4 billion. 7 or 8 years ago, we were putting $200 or $300 million into the grid. So we've ramped our investment significantly, and we'll likely go to $2 billion over the next 5 years in preparation for this great need and demand on the grid.
Ted Koppel spoke here at the conference yesterday. He's written a book that talks about the volatility and the vulnerability of the grid. And of course, if you were a bad actor somewhere in the world, it would be your most desired target to cripple the United States. How vulnerable do you think we are, both from the structure of what the grid is and what it can handle, but also its security?
So I'll tell you this, the topic is cybersecurity,
Sure.
which is an extremely important topic for the grid and for other important infrastructure in the country. And we've got a very elaborate defense in depth system as it relates to cybersecurity. We have a team that's fully dedicated to this 24/7, 365, but we're not alone in this either. We're connected to the FBI and many other Homeland Security and other agencies, government agencies, as well as connected to the entire utility industry. And there's constant conversation, real-time conversation about what the threats are. And I can tell you, when I go into our operating center for cyber, you can see where the attacks are coming from, and they're coming from the countries that you would expect. And but we've got layers and layers of defense to protect the grid, and also American intelligence that's being gathered on a every moment-by-moment basis to determine where the bad actors are and how we should respond.
And I imagine what vexes you most and worries you most is the things that you haven't thought of.
Well, that is something that I keep asking my team, so what keeps you up at night? And one of the things is the best defense is our own employees. A lot of these attacks come in through phishing exercises, so if I was to leave a message with anybody that deals with infrastructure that's important to them or important to the state, is the way they get you is sometimes you open the wrong email and it starts a whole chain of events. And that's something that we monitor very carefully. We do a lot of testing and a lot of phishing exercises inside our company, in addition to all the defense and depth systems that you would expect us to have.
An aside, and people who are watching these conversations will remember this from yesterday, Matthew Schneider, former U.S. attorney in Southeast Michigan, who sort of specialized in all this, told me about a case recently where AI has developed to the point now where a CEO's voice was able to be duped and created to carry on a conversation, and called and told a treasurer or somebody to come in, that he needed a couple of $1 million
Yes.
wired to him immediately, and it happened, and it did it.
Interesting.
We've now moved beyond emails and phishing and right into artificial intelligence on this.
Well, we've had a few instances like that by email, not voice yet,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
usually someone comes and visits me and say, "Hey, I got this email from you." Sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's worrisome.
But it is worrisome, and you have to be vigilant 24/7.
As somebody who drives an electric vehicle, and I've talked about it a lot on the air, I get the naysayers who want to write to me, and I'll let you knock down a couple of what I hear often.
Sure.
Number one is that our grid can't handle everybody moving to an electric. You don't want everybody going to it at once, which I suppose you're already talking about trying to ramp up to it.
Right.
But how much of this can we handle now versus the way that we're trying to market electrics to everybody?
So we've been preparing for this because we knew it was coming, and we need to make significant investment in the grid in order to ensure that it's available and reliable when all this load comes on. But it doesn't happen overnight, Devin. We expect that by 2030, maybe 40% of the new sales would be electric vehicles, and so our investment agenda is very significant. Over the next 5 years, we'll put $8 billion into the grid. And that's really to accommodate incremental demand as well as build resiliency into the system for weather events. And it's things like new poles, new wires, new transformers, larger substations that can handle incremental demand. And so we're preparing for all of that. We'll be ready. And it doesn't happen overnight, so that's the good news. And the other good news is we're getting ready for it, and we will be ready for it.
Is the grid being stressed right now at the level of electric where we are, or are we is capacity fine for the growth that we're watching in the electric vehicle world right now?
So there's two components, which is the supply side, which is generating the power to put on the grid.
Right.
And that's sufficient, so we've got the appropriate level of reserve margin at DTE. And as a matter of fact, a good data point, on Tuesday it was 95 degrees in Detroit.
Yeah.
And we were producing enough power that not only we were meeting our own needs, but we were exporting to the grid. So we're self-sufficient as a company, and we've got a great portfolio of supply assets. 20% of our power comes from nuclear, about 15% comes from wind and solar. A good portion of it comes from coal at this point, but we're in the process of retiring that, and I can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And the balance comes from natural gas. So we've got a really nice balanced portfolio. We're well supplied. So we're well supplied onto the grid. Now the grid itself, I think, is well positioned for the demand that we have today. We've got pockets that we're working on where we're upgrading substations and upgrading wires and voltage and that sort of thing to prepare for the future. But usually we're anticipating where the demand pockets are going to be for growth. Even with EVs, we've got a pretty good idea of the demographics. We studied this pretty carefully, where it's going to penetrate first.
Yeah.
And we're watching that because we've got automated meters, so we can tell if 4 houses have got EVs now just by the signature on the load profile.
Yeah.
So we can start to anticipate where there'll be problems.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the voltage situation, because people who would get EVs all of a sudden don't just need a 110 line in their house.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to want 220 or whatever
240,
it takes, 240, whatever it's going to take for a higher powered charger.
Yes.
That's another problem for you to face too.
Well, most new homes have that, but you're right. Older homes, where you've got a 100 amp service, that's not going to be able to handle EVs, because an EV charger, you at least need to have 40 amps.
Yep.
So you'll burn up half your capacity in your home.
Yeah.
So you'll need to upgrade your panels, you'll need to upgrade your service, and those are things we know how to do and can do pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So we'll lay a new service line. We'll, you'll have to get an electrician to upgrade your panel.
Right.
And that all costs money. So that'll be a barrier for some people, because that you'll get into several $1,000s of investment.
That's exactly right.
So you're really going to want really want an EV.
You wipe out what you're saving on your gas there at that point.
Yeah, but it's a nice product, because if you charge at home at night, we offer a discount between 11 p.m. and 9. You probably know this, being an owner.
Yep.
And that's like 80 cents a gallon, 80 cents to $1 a gallon equivalent.
It's pretty great.
It's good. It's good power source.
The other criticism that I get a lot from people is that you're just kidding yourself with your electric car, because that electricity is coming from, and you just broke down where it's all coming from. There's still a lot of coal in there. There's still a lot of fossil fuels being used to produce my clean car.
Right. Well, I'll give you a vision, and to give people comfort on this topic. So we started on this journey about 7 or 8 years ago, where we committed to being reducing carbon by 80% by 2040, and we're already at 30%. And we retired 3 coal plants, but we replaced them with 2 resources. natural gas, which is a very clean burning fuel and low carbon fuel, and wind. So we've made a $3 billion investment in wind, and we just built a state-of-the-art natural gas facility. And just let me give you a feel for the quality of carbon reduction that you get from a natural gas facility. So in St. Clair County, we commissioned the Blue Water Energy Center, and we retired an equivalent size coal plant. So just by converting from coal to gas, a state-of-the-art, you're 50% more efficient, so that means you're emitting 50% less carbon just because of the efficiency of the plant.
Yep.
So much more efficient. You're going from 1950s technology to current technology. And then natural gas produces 30% less carbon just by its makeup than coal. So you get an 80% reduction just by going from an old coal plant to a brand new natural gas plant. Now when you layer wind on top of that, you start reducing how much that plant runs, so you even reduce carbon even more. So you need all of the above, and we can't let perfection be the enemy of progress. So if we can move to an 80% reduction just by going from coal to gas, and then maybe go to 90% by layering on a significant amount of renewables, we're getting pretty close to a decarbonized future. And I think then you can feel good about your EV, that every year DT is decarbonizing your EV. In essence. Absolutely. By 2028, we'll be at 50%. And will likely be at 80% before the mid-2030s.
And as I often point out to people, you can make energy at your plants more efficiently than I can at my gas station and in my car, right? I mean, it's the transfer is just...
I think the the reality is that electricity is a very economic commodity. And so when you're charging at home, you're charging for the equivalent of 80 cents to $1 a gallon. And right now it's $4 a gallon. Even at $2 or $3 a gallon, electricity is still a great bargain for charging
I don't talk
your car.
about it much because I know a lot of people are hurting, but I have enjoyed driving past gas stations right now. I want to talk to you about nuclear.
Yes.
There is a small but passionate component of thinkers in the energy world who really still believe that nuclear is our future. It's the only, it is unfortunately defined by a couple of horrendous accidents, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, Fukushima, but that this is still, especially as it is now starting to, right now our nuclear plants run on nuclear fission. People are starting to actually see the possibility that nuclear fusion might, which is an even more efficient transfer. Give me your outlook on the future of nuclear power.
Well, we've owned and operated a nuclear plant since 1985, Fermi 2, and it's been a wonderful carbon-free resource, and it's become more and more valuable as a carbon-free resource for us. It produces 20% of our power for our company, so it's a very significant resource, and it's part of our portfolio, that we operate. There's a lot of research and a lot of investment into small nuclear reactors, smaller nuclear reactors. They call them modular reactors. But I think we're some time away, Devin. We're investing, as part of an industry to do the R&D on this. So the industry is together on this. We want more nuclear because it is a wonderful resource. It's a very efficient resource, very clean resource. But it's going to be some time. I think it's going to be at least a decade before it becomes commercially available. But that's okay. We need to start lining up some of these future technologies. So, some of the key technologies are nuclear, but also hydrogen. Green hydrogen and blue hydrogen. Carbon capture and sequestration. I mean, if we want to make the rest of the trip from 90% to 100% carbon free, we're going to need to invest in nuclear and do the R&D. We're going to need to invest in hydrogen, and we're going to need to invest in carbon capture and sequestration because some of our large industrial customers don't have any other options to decarbonize other than capturing the carbon from their emissions and then storing it underground, which is very feasible. And we've got that's a great economic development opportunity for the state of Michigan as well. We've got great geology to be able to store the carbon in a safe way and reliable way.
I read recently, though, that nuclear, more than anything, needs a new PR agent. We need to, somebody was suggesting, what if we started calling it elemental energy, something, because people, radiation, in fact, radiation does kill. I think it's 40,000 people a year. It's called skin cancer. We don't really quite equate, our understanding of the way this all works is kind of working against nuclear progress.
And nuclear operations and regulations are pretty elaborate and pretty stringent in terms of radiation and exposure to radiation. I mean, we track it very carefully inside our plants. And all of our plants across the country are best in class, and it is a great resource, but it's going to take some time and investment, and like you said, education. to understand the benefits of it into the future.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask the question that you get asked most often by customers, and
Sure.
that is, you know, why does my power still go out? Why have we not been able to, and especially as we just watched what happened in Gaylord, we have these more and more severe, crazy weather
Yes.
events, and we still rely on overhanging power lines
Sure.
generally to,
Sure.
Why haven't we been able to solve this conundrum?
Well, it's, you know, obviously there's been a significant amount of climate change over the last decade or so, and we started to study this back in 2013 and saw worsening wind patterns, like the number of events where the wind exceeds 40 miles an hour on any given day have started to go up significantly.
Yes.
Since that was in 2013, we knew that. And the biggest culprit of power outages are trees. 80% of our outages are trees. So as you know, we've got a very aggressive tree trimming program. We've taken that program in 2013. We're investing about $65 million a year to trim trees. This year will be well over $200 million of investment into pushing the trees away from the wires. And if we can do that successfully, we'll get about 80%, solve about 80% of the problem. We'll be through the entire cycle within the next 2 or 3 years. So we're year 6 into an 8-year program. And we're starting to see significant benefits in the circuits where we've completed. But once you've got the trees off the wires, we also have got an aging system where we need to replace poles, insulators, transformers, and upgrade all of that equipment so that we eliminate the other 20% of the time where we're causing power outages for our customers, which, you know, as you said, people working from home, EVs. What I've told my team is our customers expect us to have a flawless grid, and we really need to invest to move towards that aspiration to have a flawless grid. And with the level of investment and a level of energy inside DTE right now to create a flawless grid, we will get there. And but we'll still continue to have some outages. We're also looking at undergrounding and strategic
I was going to say, because that's another question you get all the time. Why aren't the wires just underground?
Well, you know, since the 60s, we've been putting wires underground for new subdivisions. Anything that was built before the 60s is above ground. So I did a study for a small community of about 14,000 residents. The mayor, you know, was asking me, look, you need to underground the entire system. I said, look, Mayor, I will do the study for you. I'll even help you fund your own independent study to understand what it would cost to bury lines for, you know, 14,000 customers. And it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And you're tearing up people's lawns, people's driveways, and then we're leaving poles in the backyard anyway because the communications cables that use those poles, they're not going to bury their stuff. So you end up doing a lot of work.
I guess people still, some people still need phone lines.
Right, yeah, well, and cable TV.
But cable television,
and there's a lot of fiber optics on those poles.
That's true,
And so where we ended up with that, I said, Mayor, you know, we can, you know, it's like a $30,000 to $40,000 assessment for each customer. And but if you let me trim the trees, I'll get you 90% of the way there. And he said, look, go trim the trees. So we went to trim the trees and got a great result, right? And then we started upgrading the equipment. So overhead's extremely reliable, but you have to stay on it.
Got to stay on it.
You got to stay on it. You got to stay on the vegetation management, and you have to stay on the maintenance. And we've got I'd say, the most aggressive plan probably ever in our history in terms of investing in the grid and maintaining the grid and preparing it for the future. So I would tell our customers, be confident that DTE is doing all they can to improve the situation. And you know, we communicate a lot with our customers where we're doing work now and letting them know that we're there and doing the work and that they should expect a different result. And I believe they're seeing a different result where we've done the work. But we've got a lot of work to do.
It never ends.
Right.
Let me finish by asking you what I've been asking a number of people about the most interesting thing that you've heard during this year's policy conference.
Probably the one message I continue to hear over and over is how valuable it is to come together physically and be with one another to have these important conversations. You know, you can do these on, you know, Teams and Zoom and so on and so forth, but nothing replaces human contact in terms of being able to talk to someone face to face and have a really productive conversation. And I think it helps move our state forward. This conference is about moving policy forward and moving progress and economic development. So I think that's what I've heard. It's a resounding message of this is really good. We really need to make sure we keep doing this each and every year.
It's different looking somebody in the eye. There's no doubt
it certainly is.
Jerry Narcia of DTE.
Thank you, Devin.
Really good to talk to you, as
it
it always is. I'm fascinated by what you do, so thanks so much for the time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
More to come here from the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island on this year's Policy Conference 2022.